There is a garden in Warsaw that holds a secret no longer. Under an apple tree in a yard that no longer exists in the form it once did, the house bombed, the neighborhood destroyed, the entire landscape of the Warsaw Ghetto replaced by something that looks nothing like what was there before. A woman once buried glass jars. Inside the jars were pieces of paper. On the pieces of paper were names. 2,500 names. 2,500 children who had been given new identities, new families, new lives in the world outside the ghetto walls. And beside each new name, carefully recorded in Irena Sendler's handwriting, the original name, the real name, the name the parents had given, the name that connected each child to the family that had trusted her with the most valuable thing they possessed. The jars were buried so that the names would survive, so that if Irena did not survive, and she had every reason to believe she would not, the record would still exist, the children could still be found, the families that were left could still be reconnected with what remained of themselves. She understood with the clarity of a woman who had been watching the systematic destruction of an entire people that names are not just labels, they are the thread that connects a person to their history, to their parents, to the community that made them. Take away the name, and you take away something that cannot be fully replaced. Keep the name, even underground, even in a jar, even under an apple tree in a neighbor's yard with German soldiers patrolling the streets above, and you preserve something essential. Irena Sendler was 32 years old when Germany invaded Poland in September of 1939. She was a social worker in the Warsaw Department of Social Welfare, a position that gave her access to the poorest and most vulnerable populations of the city. She had grown up in a family where the obligation to help those in need was treated as a basic principle of human decency. Her father, a doctor, had died of typhus contracted while treating Jewish patients whom other doctors had refused to see. He had told her before he died, "If you see someone drowning, you must jump in to save them, even if you cannot swim." She had been living by this principle her entire professional life. When the Warsaw Ghetto was established in November of 1940, sealing more than 400,000 Jewish people behind walls in conditions deliberately designed to produce starvation, disease, and death, Irena used her social welfare credentials to obtain a pass that allowed her to enter the ghetto under the pretext of monitoring typhus and other infectious diseases. It was a legitimate concern from the German perspective. They did not want disease spreading outside the walls. It was also a door, and Irena walked through it every day. What she did inside the ghetto in the 2 years that followed, as part of a network of Polish resistance workers operating under the name Zagota, was one of the most sustained and methodical rescue operations of the entire Holocaust. She smuggled children out. The methods were as varied as the circumstances demanded. Infants sedated and hidden in the bottom of toolboxes, small children curled inside suitcases, older children trained to walk out disguised as Polish workers, or carried in ambulances among the sick, or led through the network of underground sewers that connected the ghetto to the Aryan side of the city. She bribed guards, forged documents, built relationships with people on both sides of the wall who were willing to look the other way or actively help. She organized the receiving end, the network of convents, orphanages, and Polish families who would take the children in and give them new names and new lives. The parents were the hardest part. The parents knew what was happening around them. They had watched their neighbors disappear. They had seen the deportations that everyone knew, regardless of what they were officially told, were not resettlement, but death. They understood, with the terrible clarity of people who have no good choices available to them, that the only thing they could do for their children was give them away, hand them to a stranger, trust that the stranger would keep them safe, would remember their names, would find them again if any of them survived. Many parents could not do it. The grief of that moment, the moment of handing a child to someone and not knowing if you would ever see them again, was unbearable, and some chose to keep their children with them rather than face it. Irena did not judge them. She understood, but she kept coming back. She kept asking. She kept explaining that the alternative, with the deportations accelerating and the ghetto being systematically emptied, was almost certainly death. She was caught on October 20th, 1943.
The Gestapo had been watching. Someone had informed. They came to her apartment and searched it, finding lists that she had not yet managed to destroy, evidence of the network she was running. She was taken to Powiat prison, which was in Warsaw, and which was known as a place that people entered and did not leave. She was interrogated. She was tortured. Her legs and feet were broken. She did not reveal the location of the jars. She did not reveal the names of her collaborators. She did not give the Gestapo the information that would have allowed them to find the children she had smuggled out and the families who had taken them in. She held everything she knew inside a silence that the pain could not break, and she held it through weeks of interrogation in conditions that were designed to break exactly this kind of silence. Zagota bribed the guards responsible for her execution. On the day she was scheduled to be shot, the papers were altered. Her name appeared on the list of the executed, but she was released into the city, alive, physically damaged, officially dead. She went underground, continued to work with the network under a false identity, and survived the war. After the war, she dug up the jars. The lists were intact, 2,500 names, each paired with the new identity that child had been given, each representing a family connection that the Holocaust had tried to sever permanently. She took the lists to the organization that had been established to help Jewish survivors find their families, and the long, painful, and often heartbreaking work of reconnection began. Many of the parents were dead. The deportations that Irena had tried to rescue children from had done their work. The children she had saved came out of convents and orphanages and Polish homes to learn that the families they had come from were gone, that the parents who had pressed them into a stranger's arms in a ghetto in 1942 or 1943 had been murdered in Treblinka or Auschwitz in the months that followed. The jars preserved the names. They could not preserve the families. That was a loss that no amount of record-keeping could address. But some families survived and were found, and the children who had grown up not knowing who they were, knowing only their false names, their false histories, the cover stories that had kept them alive, could learn the truth of where they had come from. The jars made this possible. The names in the jars were the thread that Irena had preserved underground through her arrest and her torture and her official death and her month in hiding, so that it would still be there when the war was over and it was safe for it to breathe. Irena Sendler lived until 2008. She was 98 years old when she died, in Warsaw, the city where she had spent her entire life. She had been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007 at age 97. The nomination came too late, and the prize went to another recipient. She had spent most of the post-war decades in relative obscurity, her story suppressed first by the German occupation and then by the communist government of Poland, which had little interest in celebrating the kind of individual moral heroism that her story represented.
She became internationally known largely through the efforts of 4 American high school students in Kansas who discovered her story in 1999 and wrote a play about her, which brought her name to a global audience for the first time. She said in the interviews she gave in her final years that she did not feel she had done enough. She thought about the children she could not have saved, the ones whose parents could not let go, the ones she had not reached in time, the ones who had died despite everything. She carried this not as guilt exactly, but as weight, the weight of a person who had done everything they could and knew that everything was not enough. 2,500 children survived because of her. Their descendants, the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the people she pulled out of the Warsaw Ghetto in suitcases and toolboxes and ambulances, number in the tens of thousands today. They are alive because she jumped in, even though she could not swim. The apple tree is gone. The garden is gone. The neighbor's yard is gone. Warsaw was destroyed and rebuilt, and the map of the city looks nothing like it did in 1943. But the names that were buried in the jars are in the archives now, preserved, accessible, permanent. The thread that Irena Sendler kept underground through everything the Gestapo did to her is still intact. It will not break.